Hi everyone, my name is Sun. I'm one of the two vice consuls here at the U.S. Consulate in Erbil. We're starting over after technical difficulty. So I'm here to connect with all of you on Facebook about the visa process, how to apply. I know you guys have many questions and I've met many of you in person at the consulate, but at the window it's kind of hard to answer all your questions. So I'm here now ready to take your questions. Last night I was looking through the questions that you asked when we first posted and announced that we were going to do this. And so I'll start by answering some of the basic questions that I saw and many people asked so that I can cover ground on a lot of topics. And then once we kind of get into that, then I'll respond directly to all the comments you're posting there. So one of the comments or questions I got frequently was, what kind of visas do we process here in Erbil? And we do all types of visas except for immigrant visas. So if you're looking to live in America permanently, this is not the right place. You have to go to the embassy in Baghdad. But we do all other types of visas, including tourist visas, B1, B2s, student visas, including Js and Fs. We also do, very infrequently, but we also do work visas such as H-1Bs, investor visas like Ls. You can look up the visa categories online, but mainly we get the bulk of the applications we get are tourist visas and student visas. And how do you apply? So it's very easy. You go online, you pick a slot that you want to take a day and a time, and then you pay the $160 fee. This is a non-refundable fee, so even if you're refused, you don't get a refund. If you were refused and you want to apply again, you need to pay the fee again. This is the fee that requires, me to be here and to interview everyone. It's required for all the processing we do with your application in DC. So yeah, that's why it costs $160. We get many questions about, the price, but that's what it is. Another question that I got often was about administrative processing. So sometimes I'll interview you and then I'll tell you your case is going to take some more time. Provide us with some more information and then we will continue processing your case. So the timeline for admin processing can vary widely. It usually takes about 3 months, but depending on the situation, sometimes we can expedite, sometimes we can't expedite. Sometimes it can take years, unfortunately, because it's not a process we do here. We send that information to another office, and then we keep processing your case depending on the response we get. So many people will inquire every week, every month, oh, what's going on with my case? But the reply we give you is all we know. We still haven't received a response. So for admin processing cases, you just have to be patient with us. Let's see. Who can apply for visas? Basically, anyone can apply for visas. I also got a lot of questions on when I can apply again. So I was refused, and now I want to go for the same purpose or different purpose. When can I apply again? And basically, you can apply whenever you'd like. What we try to do here is that if if I interviewed you and you apply again, I'm going to try not to interview you. I'm going to give your case to another officer so that you can have a fair chance at a visa. If you come back for the third time, because I only have 2 officers, I'll probably interview you again, or we can encourage you to apply in Baghdad or somewhere else. So what happens when you refuse, all the case notes are seen by the following interviewing officers. So if you have multiple refusals, honestly, it's not very good. It doesn't reflect so positively on your case unless something drastic happened in your circumstances or you have a different travel reason. So yeah, that's the case with prior refusals. So another question is, if you didn't travel on your visa, how does that change your circumstances or your chances of getting another visa? We look at cases individually on a case-by-case basis. So maybe you have a good reason for why you couldn't travel. Personally, that's not going to reflect negatively on the second time you apply again. But, I mean, it could depend. I mean, maybe you had a reason why you couldn't travel and it doesn't make sense to me, then that could be a negative factor. So it's hard to say but we don't just look at one thing when we interview an applicant. Multiple things go into deciding whether one should or should not get a visa. And it's true that the process is very subjective. It really depends on the individual interviewing officer to decide, one way or the other. And that's why we have multiple officers here. And that's why if you apply here and don't get in, you apply somewhere else, you might get it. So there's a little bit of subjectivity and luck involved as well. But in general, what we consider when we interview, the most important thing we consider when you apply for a tourist or a student visa is whether we think that you're going to abide by the terms of the visa, whether we think that you're going to use the visa properly. By that I mean you're going to go to the States for 10 days as you said you were going to, and then return to your home country. In recent years, we've seen a lot of people abuse the terms of their visa. They go on a student visa, never come back, or they go on a tourist visa, start working, and never come back. And so the bar for overcoming the law for getting a visa has become a little bit harder, to be honest, because there have been people misusing their visas. So, I get a lot of angry comments, we're here and we never issue anyone visas. We do the best we can, but we are here to perform a specific function, is to determine whether someone should be eligible or should not be eligible for a visa. And so you have to be patient and understanding with us on that point. Another common question that I get is whether we process SIVs here. Those are special immigrant visas that we give to people who have worked with us for a very long time. Those are considered immigrant visas, so we don't do them here. Only Baghdad does them. Okay, so we get a lot of questions on documents. I brought all these documents, my rental agreements, my transcript, just you name it. We get lots of documents. I have a document from my employer, for example. And sometimes I'm going to ask for documents, but a lot of times we don't look at documents. I mean, this is not like 100%. So feel free to bring the documents if you have them at home. But know that we're not always going to want to look at the documents because we've seen a lot of document fraud. So documents acquired fraudulently, or say it's from a certain employer, but it's not really from that employer. And we've gotten quite good at distinguishing the bad from the good documents. And it also takes up more time looking at the documents. So sometimes I'll ask for a document, but sometimes even if you brought the document, I'm not going to look through, the whole folder that you brought me. So that's the thing with documents. It's always good to have, them in case I want to see them. But what can also happen is if you came with certain documents and I thought that you should have a different document, I can always temporarily put your case on hold and ask you to send me your document via email. And then right when you send it to me, I can look at it and then make my decision. So it's not life or death. It's if you don't bring something, and I don't automatically refuse an applicant just because they didn't have all the things they should have had. Some things are required, like for certain visas, there are certain documents that you should know to bring. It's on our website. But other documents like marriage certificates, birth certificates, stuff like that, that are not required, you're welcome to bring, but don't be mad if I don't ask for it. Certain documents that you do need so for J visas, we need the DS 2019 document, and for Fs, we need your I-20. Those are documents that your school will send to DHS. DHS will do some processing and then send back to the school, which the school will send you. So those documents we really need. For student visas, we also need you to pay the SIVIS fee, $200 SIVIS fee, before coming in for an interview. If you come without it, we will send you back to pay it and have a receipt before we can start the interview. What other questions? Okay. we got some questions. Iranian applicants, we do see some, not too many, but they can also apply in Dubai and Turkey. And okay, how long does it take to process the visa? Okay, so we normally tell people that they can they can pick it up from DHL in about 1 week, but it can be processed. The fastest we ever done it is probably 2 days or so. There's some additional checks that need to happen before we can issue the visa. It's not like I interview you, turn around, stamp the visa, and I have it right there. That's why we can't do same day processing. So that's normally how long it takes, about 1 week. But if it goes under admin processing, like I explained, it could take weeks, months, and sometimes years. Medical visa, people going to get treatment in the United States. That's a valid reason to go on a tourist visa. That's actually a tourist / medical visa. So if you're going for medical tourism, that's the same thing. So basically we interview like I would interview people going for tourism or going to visit somebody. But for medical cases, I would expect you to have some documents relating to your condition or relating to whoever you're escorting to see whether you, the kind of things I would look at is whether you tried to get treatment here, whether the treatment is only available in America, why do you want to go to America, can you pay for this? Those are all different things we look at. When we interview someone, it's a kind of a decision based on multiple factors and not just one thing. A lot of people say, well, you never approve Arabs, you never approve Kurds. No, we do not take those kinds of ethnicity or your nationality into consideration when doing a visa. All I really care about is whether you're going to abide by the terms of the visa, whether you come from, Ethiopia or the UK. The same standards apply all across the world when it comes to tourist visa or non-immigrant visa processing. Let's see. For people that want to apply for refugee status with IOM or the UN and immigrate to America, we don't do that here. You go through IOM, and any immigrant visa processing we don't do here. So you'll see on our website, there's no option to apply for refugee or immigrant status here. Okay, so another thing that I want to advise you is not to use travel agencies. We have a lot of people that use travel agencies to fill out their application, which is understandable, but if your English is not good, for example, but a lot of tourist agencies here take your money and don't do justice to your application. We have a lot of kind of copycat applications where I see the same hotel, same city, and I know you're not really going to the city. So someone will say, I'm going to New York, I'm staying at W Hotel. And then during the interviews, they'll say they're going to a different state. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you'd have told your travel agent something else, but they didn't do justice to really filling out the application completely and accurately, which makes it very hard for us to kind of see whether you're a credible applicant. And that's something we look at very closely, whether you're being truthful in what you say you're going to do. But if your application says one thing and then in your interview you say another thing, that's a bad sign for us. So please try not to use travel agencies. And also know that you never have to pay anyone to get a visa. A lot of people think that if they go through a broker or something that increases their chances of getting a visa. But no, don't waste your money. Just pay the $160 and come straight to us. Okay. On that topic, we don't have any formal relationships or contracts with any tourist agency. So if someone says we have like a direct line of communication to us, don't believe them, because we don't. We don't like seeing travel agencies on our applications, period. Okay. I get a lot of questions also on business visas. People who want to go for workshops, who want to meet with their contacts, who wants they work for an American company here and they want to visit headquarters, for example, which are all very, very valid reasons for travel, and we welcome them. But for kind of things I look at when I get a businessman or businesswoman going for these meetings is, how long you've been with the company here. I'm trying to verify whether you actually are employed with that company and whether you've had a relationship with the company you're visiting, whether this meeting will further, your business contract. Like sometimes, I need to have a reason that makes sense to me for why you want to go. And a lot of times they're very valid reasons. But we've had even, business people, very accomplished people, never come back. So the bar is higher for people to go to the States, unfortunately. But business visa applications we see all the time and are valid, very valid reasons for travel. Okay. I'll answer some questions on, revocations and cancellations. So some people get an email or call from us saying your visa is revoked, your visa is canceled. What does that mean? That means, so revocation is when your visa is canceled and there's a negative implication to it, saying we don't want you to have another visa. Cancellation is kind of the same thing, but it's kind of a no fault. So if you had your visa canceled and you reapply, you could have a good chance, maybe even the same chance you had before of acquiring a visa. But once you have your visa revoked, I would say it's pretty hard to get another visa. I mean, you can always apply, but because there are negative implications that come with a revoked visa. So when do we revoke visas? So sometimes after you travel to the United States, if you try to do something illegal while you're in the States, then different authorities, law enforcement agencies, immigration agencies, they will contact us and say, this person that you issued in Erbil, for example, tried to enter into Canada and claim asylum. So we revoked their visas. And so then we get that email from them, and then we contact you and say your visa has been revoked. Cancellation is a little bit different, but sometimes we cancel your visas, not for the same reasons, but say you've done something in the States that catches some agency's radar, but it's not so negative that we're not going to revoke it, but we're going to cancel it. Then we will do the same thing. We'll offer you the courtesy of telling you that your visa has been canceled. Your visa has been can also be canceled by us. Like if you or someone, say three of you traveled together and you were going to go to New York for vacation or something, and then one of your members that you're traveling with ends up, we get some kind of information that is a derogatory information on one of the people, say they've done something wrong, committed a crime in the United States or something like that, then because you're associated with those other people, then we're going to do our diligence and cancel the other people's visas so that you're not traveling again, or you need to come back before you can get another visa or something like that. Okay. So invitation letters. We get a lot of people bringing invitation letters from just their friends or family saying, oh, my uncle wanted to come for his wedding and I want to go visit him, or from different companies that want to see you. So, and I get a lot of questions on whether they're helpful. So invitation letters from family members are generally not helpful, to be honest, because I generally believe you if you say your uncle or aunt or sister or brother really want to see you and you're going to visit them. I believe you're going to visit them. So I don't need an invitation letter saying, even if they're American citizens or LPRs, I don't need anything from them really. But if you say you're going because, Google has invited you to a conference, then I'm going to want to see a letter from Google, and a genuine letter from Google. What else? Okay, so the chances of getting a visa, whether you apply alone or apply with a family. This is also, it depends. It's on a case-by-case basis, but generally, if you just think in your mind, like if you were an officer, what would you be looking at if someone is applying for a visa? And as an officer, you're supposed to be looking at whether the applicant is going to abide by the terms of a temporary tourist visa. So if you tell me you just sold all your stuff and you're going with your 7 family members to America for vacation, it might be less believable that you're going temporarily. That's why a lot of families tend not to get visas, because it's, first of all, it's very expensive to go as an entire family, especially a big family. And, for people to want to return to Iraq, they have to have some ties remaining to Iraq, right? So I'm going to want to, know whether you still have a house here, you still have a job here, you still have some family members remaining that you'll want to come to see. Just the different ties. We assess how strong the ties you have are to your home country. So, if you're just traveling by yourself and you're leaving your wife and kids and, your house and your job and car and everything else, then, I might believe you more if you say you're going for a temporary trip. But if I see, in our interview, I feel like you're cutting all ties to Iraq and, you're taking all your family members and all your money and everything, then it might be harder for me to believe that you're going on a temporary trip and that you might, say you're going for tourism and then that you wouldn't come back. Let's see. Okay. So, okay. A lot of people also ask how long visas are valid for. Visas are valid for 1 year generally. The reason for that is based on reciprocity. So every country has an agreement with another country of how they're going to come up with visa regulations and rules. For Iraq, the rules between Iraq and the United States is 1 year. So when I came here to work, I also got a 1 year visa. I have to renew if I want to stay. So that's the agreement we established. So there's no way I can issue you a 10-year visa. So if you have a different passport, for example, of course you can get longer or shorter. It really depends on your nationality. And so when we issue visas, tourist visas, they're generally for 1 year. But how long you can actually stay in the States depends on what the CBP, Customs and Border Control officers, decide at the port of entry. So that's at an airport. So you get to the airport, you go through customs, and the officer can give you 1 year, but the officer can't, because that's the maximum, right? But they can also give you 6 months. They can also give you 7 days. They can also tell you you can't enter. That's not up to us. Here we assess whether you're eligible to travel, but it's not up to us to determine how long you can stay. Let's see, transit visas. Okay, those transit visas, a lot of flight attendants and flight crew, they qualify for C/D visas. We don't see them very much, but the process for applying for them are the same. You apply for it online, you come in for an interview. We just apply a different set of laws to different types of applications. Okay, so let's go back to student visas really quick. So for F visas, I-20s, so you have been accepted to a school or English program, and you come in and you're excited to go, and you come in for a visa interview and you're refused, and all your dreams of studying in the U.S. are just go up in flames. Yeah, that can happen. Just because you're accepted to the school doesn't mean that you will be able to study there. You have to get a visa, and it is my job to assess whether we think that you will abide by the terms of the visa and come back after you finished your studies. I can also look at whether I think you'll be a good student, that you'll actually finish your program, and whether you'll be able to pay for the program. In terms of payment, I'm only supposed to judge whether you'll be able to finance the first year of studies. So I don't expect you to bring me bank statements showing, how you will pay for all 4 years. But just on a surface level, I'm supposed to be able to assess whether you are a credible student, that you intend to study in America. And so that's where a lot of people fail. The kind of things that I like to look at when doing student visas is kind of like your history. So if you're going for a PhD, I want to see your grades from your master's program, your college degree, even maybe your high school, like how well you did, how serious of a student are you, what kind of other things have you done on your own, what kind of job you have now, what are your plans for after you finish studying, and stuff like that. Whether you try to learn English on your own, if you are going on an English program. I generally feel like, if you've never tried to learn English locally and you want to spend tons of money to learn English in America, I don't find that very credible. At least if you've tried, there's tons of different very good English programs here that you can do for much cheaper, and I would want to see that you've actually at least tried to learn English here before embarking on a very expensive and time-consuming process. Okay, all right. So people have also asked whether the chances of getting a visa are better in Erbil or Baghdad. Honestly, I'm not sure. I know my colleagues in Baghdad, they're all great people, but, it's case by case, and the kind of cases we see here are a little bit different from the cases we see there. So kind of the expertise we all have in certain areas might be a little different. But in general, within Iraq, the chances are, I would say the refusal and acceptance rates are about the same. And we do our very best to keep it on the same level so that people aren't visa shopping within Iraq. It shouldn't be different whether you go to Baghdad or Erbil. Although, individually, officers have different, inclinations, or, the officer's subjectivity will definitely be reflected in the interview and the adjudication process, although we do our best to apply the law in a neutral way. But it would probably be different if you were applying, say, in Turkey or in Iran, or, not in Iran, but say, Dubai, because they don't see Iraqi applicants, on a regular basis. It might be a little harder for them to adjudicate. And so, on a country-by-country basis, it might be a little different. But in Iraq, it should be the same. Baghdad has a little bit longer wait time right now, but that can also change and fluctuate, depending on officer availability on our calendars here. All right. This is okay. I've kind of answered this, but Kurds and Arabs, yes, same procedure. We don't distinguish, Iraqi passport as an Iraqi passport. I don't care about religion. I don't care where you're from. I don't. Those kinds of things, there's a non-discrimination kind of, thing we've established. I don't even honestly know. I don't speak Kurdish. I don't speak Arabic, so there's no discrimination in terms of where you're from or your background. Okay. Bank statement. All right. So some people bring bank statements, some people don't, and sometimes I ask for it and sometimes I don't. And it's just on a case-by-case basis. I know a lot of you here in Iraq, you don't use banks, you don't trust banks, and I get that. So, but if you are a big business, for example, doing business with another big business abroad, it would be hard for me to believe that you do all your transactions, through cash. So then I'm going to want to see some kind of transaction that you've had with your, supplier, whoever. But, in terms of how much money you have in your possession, I understand that you keep money at home in cash or gold or whatever it is, instead of putting it in the bank. So sometimes I'll ask for a bank statement. Whether you have it or not, it's not really going to change how I see your case. And sometimes if I really want it, I can always, ask you to email it to me. So that's that. Okay, so whether being married or single, what? Oh, okay. So can you marry an AMSIT and immigrate to America? Okay. So if you marry an American citizen and want to immigrate to the United States, you would do your interview in Baghdad. That's an immigrant visa. K visas, fiancé visas, those are also immigrant visas. So we don't do them here. Whether being married or single has a difference on your application. We get that a lot. It's also on a case-by-case basis. Generally, if you're single and you don't have children, you might not have a big family, and you're not obligated to be, like, for example, the breadwinner of a family, and you're more mobile and ready to travel. Maybe you'd have to establish some other ties to your home country, right? So if you're married, you have 5 kids, and you're going on a vacation, I could probably assume that you're going to come back because you don't want to leave your wife and 5 kids or husband and 5 kids behind, right? But if you're single, don't have, any familiar relationships that obligate you to return to Iraq, I'm going to ask some questions to see what other ties you have to Iraq. Maybe job, maybe property, all those other types of things. Okay, so I mentioned appointments a little earlier, but we've been diligent in scheduling up to the max that we can possibly handle in a day. So right now, there's not much wait time. So people that live up here, okay, 1 day, 2 day wait time. So you don't need to travel all the way to Baghdad if you live in the area. Previously, we've had longer wait times, but right now it's looking pretty good. Yeah. So how to contact us? The best way to contact us is through the Erbil NIV website or email address. We check it every day, and we respond to you within 24 hours. And we don't have a phone, so don't try to call us. Okay. We got more questions on not checking documents. As I said, we don't always check documents, and while it's good to bring as many documents as you think would be good for the interview, it's really on a case-by-case basis. So I would say if there's some documents that are hard to get, don't run around everywhere trying to get them. The reason we don't look at documents very carefully is because a lot of documents we have seen in the past have not been genuine. They've been, forged documents or fraudulent documents. So we tend not to rely so heavily on documents anymore. Even bank statements have been fake. Marriage certificates have been fake. So that's why we don't look at them. So don't be upset at us for not looking at documents if you took a long time to prepare them. If I really want to see a document and it's crucial to your case, then I'll put your case on hold, and then I'll ask you to email it to us. The exception to the document requirement is for student visas. So for J's, again, you're going to need your DS 2019. For F's, you're going to need your I-20. Okay. I answered this one. Okay. People have not been tuning in since the beginning. So when can you reapply once you've been refused? I would not say you should reapply unless you have a drastic change in your circumstances, because you will likely be rejected again, and multiple refusals will not look good on your application. So when we open your application, we can see how many times you've been refused and where. So if I see a whole list, I'm not going to have, even before starting to look into your case, I'm not going to start with a good impression of you as an applicant. So, but I mean, if you have a legitimate reason for applying, again, that's a different story. So when you apply again, what happens is if I interview you, I will ask my colleague to interview you, just so you have a fair chance with a new officer. because if you applied last month and were rejected and you get the same adjudicator, well, you'll probably be rejected again unless something has changed. Okay, a question about diversity visas. This is also an immigrant visa. So when you're thinking about visas, just think, do I want to go on a temporary visit and come back, or do I want to go and live in America permanently? If you want to go live in America permanently, you're going to want to apply for an immigrant visa, which you have to do through a petition. You cannot just say, I want to live in America and apply for an immigrant visa. You need someone to petition on your behalf. So you will know if you're applying for an immigrant visa. So immigrant visas or diversity visas, those are based on a lottery system we have. Those are all processed in Baghdad along with SIVs, special immigrant visas. Cool. Okay, so when you send us an email, we'll reply to you right away with an auto reply saying that we'll respond to your individual email at a later time, but we encourage you to read all the information in the auto reply very carefully, because 90% of your questions can be answered in the auto reply email. Please read our website and read our email. We take a lot of time to update that information. And, you know, there are only a handful of us working in the office, so bear with us. Okay. Yeah. Can Syrians apply here? Yes. Anyone can apply here. And, okay, so a question on ESTA. So there are citizens of certain countries who used to be eligible for a visa waiver program, but if they have traveled to certain countries like Syria, North Korea, what else is there? Iran, Iraq, they have to come in for an interview. Don't ask me why. This is what the government tells us we need to do. You need to come in for an interview. So people who have passports from Germany, who would have qualified for a waiver program in the past, Germany, the UK, Australia, Canada, like there's so many countries that, you know, they used to be able to travel to the US without an interview, but now they need to come in for an interview. So, yeah, it'll be quick and easy, but you still have to come in and see a consular officer. Okay. Is there an appeal process for visa adjudications? So I know that certain missions do that. You can appeal the decision that a consular officer has made. But for visas to the US, there is no appeal process. You basically have to pay again, apply again, interview with the same officer, different post, wherever. But you can't appeal the decision. Actually, this is something that the government has given to consular officers when we are, you know, commissioned to go and do our jobs, is that no one can appeal our decisions, not even our bosses, not even the ambassador, not even, you know, the higher ups in Washington, D.C. So that's why we make it easy for you to apply again, but to have another chance. But no one can change the decision I make. Okay. Green card. Okay, so green card processing, or if you had a green card, you were a legal permanent resident in America in the past, but you were out of the country and you lost your status, you have lost your card or whatever it is. In order to regain your green card, you have to interview. You have to basically, ask to be readmitted to the States and then do the processing again. We don't do that here because, again, that's an immigrant function. Your green card is, a legal immigrant status in America. Here, basically, just think to yourself, easy way to think about it is like everything temporary we do here. But if you want to stay in America on a more permanent basis, you do that in Baghdad. Baghdad also does tourist visas, but they deal with all immigrant visas over there. Okay. Visa. Why do you have to apply again? Oh, okay. So you have a visa, but you want to renew your visa. do you have to come in again? Yes, you have to come in again because we have to take your fingerprints and we have to, issue another visa. It's tricky because here, visas expire after 1 year. A lot of countries, you have a longer validity. So we understand the hassle, but that's the way it goes. What does it mean? Okay. So a lot of you, so what happens in an interview? At the end of the interview, I'll either give you a pink paper that says you are refused under, 214B of the U.S. immigration law. And some of you asking, what does this mean? And I basically tell you that, you don't overcome 214B of the U.S. immigration law. Okay, what does 214B actually say? 214B says that I can issue a visa to anyone who I believe does not have immigrant intent in America. What does that mean? So that means that when I interview you, if I think that you're going to go to the United States on a temporary basis and not live there permanently, if I think that you're going to abide by the terms of the visa and stay there temporarily for whatever you said you were going to do and return to Iraq, then I can issue the visa. The law actually tells me I can't issue the visa if I think that you're an intending immigrant, that you intend to live there or never come back to Iraq. So that's why we tell you under the law you've been refused or accepted. It's actually pretty simple. There's a lot of, you're right, like subjectivity and different factors that I look at when I make that decision, but the law is actually quite simple. Are you an intending immigrant or not? We actually get some questions about drop boxes. We don't have any drop boxes, but some people who come and they haven't paid their DHL fee, we'll tell them to go pay the fee, and then you can sometimes drop stuff out at the CAC with the guards, but we don't have a formal drop box. Okay, so those of you who have an ongoing immigrant case, who are interviewing with IOM to get refugee status, or, I know immigrant visa cases take a long time, so if you're in the process of getting an immigrant visa, can you still apply for a tourist visa? Because I know sometimes it could take years and years. So I'll just go back to the fundamental thing that I look at when I adjudicate these cases is whether this person intends to come back after a temporary visit in America. If you have an immigrant visa going on, it'll be a little harder to prove that you don't intend to live in America because you already, through the immigrant visa process, you're already telling us that you have an intent to live in America permanently. But I understand if you've been waiting 5 years for immigrant visa and you want to go temporarily because your, say, grandpa is really ill, you just need to visit him really quick, but you're willing to come back and wait for the processing of your immigrant visa, that may make sense to me. But if I feel like you can't wait for your immigrant visa process to formally and legally immigrate to America, and you just want to go now with all your belongings and you're sold everything, then you don't overcome 214B of the U.S. immigration law, as I explained, and then you'll be denied a visa. But it's not, 100% one way or the other. Okay? Okay, guys, so that was a really robust set of questions you offered. Thanks for all your feedback. I'll be going home and reading all the other questions you had. Maybe we'll do one of these again, but thanks for tuning in. See you later.